And welcome to 101 Mixing Tricks, the Q&A webinar. And we have this every month. If you have any questions, send them to questions at bobbyowsinski.com or questions at 101mixingtricks.com, and they'll get to me. Or it's even easier, you can just post them here in the chat on the sidebar. Although there's a number of questions already that I have that a lot of you have, well, all of you have posted either as a comment or posted in the forum or sent me directly. So whatever the case, I am going to make sure that everybody gets it. And let's see, do we have any people here? Yeah, there's a few. So anyway, hi everybody, tell me where you're from. So I know everybody's here and that you can see me. Let me know. And right now, I'm not seeing anybody. So hopefully you guys are seeing me. I hope you are. Let me know, actually. Okay, Kevin. Finally, I saw someone. Kevin from Northern Virginia. So I guess you can see me and I guess you can hear me. Sometimes we can't always be sure on this because Webinar Jam has been known to actually hiccup a little bit, but it looks like we're good here. So let's start here with our questions. There's a number of them. And the first one is, do you have any plans for uploading a higher resolution set of videos? I'm currently watching on a Retina screen and the quality isn't that great. Enjoying the tricks though. Just wanted to send a constructive note. That's from Shane. Yes, Shane, and for everyone who asked, and there's a lot of you who have, we're going to be uploading all of the videos again in high res. They were originally shot in high res and mostly in 1920 by 1080. Some, in fact, were 1280 by 720, but they're all in high def. They're all available. Unfortunately, the platform asked for something less than that, kind of an odd resolution. And the platform is going to be updating pretty soon, and we hear in the next month. And as soon as that happens, then what we're going to do is we're going to upload everything again in high def, so you're going to see everything a lot better. So yes, Shane, that's coming very soon. Next question. First, when I draw up compressor plugins, I noticed some are already dialed in for auto gain. My rule of thumb so far has been to turn that off and work from the ground up. What's the advantage of a preset auto gain? Well, it just eliminates the need for you to do that. One of the reasons for the gain control on a compressor is the fact that when the compressor begins to work, the output decreases. So you add more gain. So you basically have the same amount as when you started. That's called makeup gain. And when you have auto gain, in fact, that just does it for you. It does the same thing. So that's actually a good thing. When you want to add more, and sometimes we want to control the level from our compressor, then auto gain isn't a good thing. Now, for instance, if you have your automation all set and you just want to back things off by half dB or dB or something like that, or you want to increase by dB, sometimes the best way to do it is just go and do it from your compressor or limiter or whatever's in the signal chain. Sometimes it's the EQ. If you can't easily do it from the automation, and sometimes automation doesn't make it easy to do. So Norm has another question. When, besides the drums, is it advisable to use stereo tracks? Well, this all comes from whatever is recorded first. So if you get recorded tracks to mix that are in stereo, then of course that's what you're going to use. Recorded, Stereo tracks almost always sound better because you get a little more of a 3D image. So you have a feeling of depth that you don't get in a mono track. And that's the good part about it. But usually, what we'll find recorded in stereo are the drums, of course. Keyboards will be stereo many times. Usually won't have guitars in stereo, but sometimes you might want to do that. But it's usually for like a solo instrument where you'll do that. And background vocals many times. If there's a big gang of vocals, if there's a lot of people, then you'll do it in stereo. So that's usually when you'll see it. Is it advisable to use stereo? Yes and no. If you have a lot of tracks available without maxing out your system, it sounds really great. The caveat is you have to know how to record stereo well, and then you have to make sure that everything fits in well together. So if you're not used to doing it, it takes some practice and some experimentation. Works better in certain things than in others. So I don't want to discourage you from doing it, but sometimes it's not necessary. Okay, let's see what else we have here from Pat. I'm totally loving the whole course and the way you explain the reasoning behind your approach, but the type of music I play recorded is more in the classic R&B, soul, smooth jazz, jazz fusion, funk style. Well, that's a lot there. Seems to me the spaciousness and clarity in that genre is more important than bigness. I'm getting a lot out of the gluing and sheen aspect of the verbs, but, and I may be jumping the gun here, can you direct me to the tricks that pertain a wider, more spaciously clear sound? Okay, yeah, when it comes to tracks, eh, when it comes to a mix, basically, there's only two things you can do. There's only so much space that you have in a mix, and I'm talking about sonic space. So usually what happens is the fewer instruments, the fewer elements you have, the less you're going to, uh, the fewer the instruments, the bigger you're going to try to make them to fill up that space. The more instruments you have, what'll happen is you'll have to make them smaller so they all fit in. And that's just the way it works. So with R&B and soul and smooth jazz and jazz fusion and funk, usually you don't have a huge number of overdubs and lots of sweetening, and so it's a more open sound to begin with. And in that case, you want to make things a little bigger. So that's where you have to start from. Are you going to make it bigger or smaller to fit in? Now, as far as gluing and sheening and everything like that, well, usually that's more important in mixes where you have fewer instruments. You'll hear the reverb, you'll hear the effects more, so that's becomes more important. So really, Pat, it depends. I hate to use that, but it depends on the arrangement of the song. More than anything, how many elements are there, how many elements are playing at the same time, and how big or how small they are. So, again, it's different every song. Yeah, The That's just easy though, easy to remember. The fewer the instruments, the bigger they each have to be. The more instruments, the more elements, the smaller they have to be. From Mike, I've never purchased a plugin yet, limiting my options to what came in Pro Tools LE and an Mbox 2 package. I use a Maxim plugin that seems to be intended for mastering and limiting. Is that the same or similar or different from an SSL bus compressor? Yeah, an SSL bus compressor just sounds like an SSL. There's nothing sounds like it. And that's usually the case with all limiters and compressors. They all have their own flavor. There's 5 basic types of limiters and compressors. They all sound a little different. There's optical, there's FET style. Optical compressor is like an LA2. There's the FET style, which is like an 1176. There's the Varimu, which is like the well, the Manley Varimu compressor, which is one. The other is a Fairchild. So they each one sounds different. Because they sound different, they work in different places better. So all compressors or limiters won't necessarily work well on a stereo bus, and vice versa. The SSL bus compressor is kind of designed just for the stereo bus. So it sounds a certain way. It's really smooth. It really sounds good because it's more of a broadcast limiter. Broadcast limiters generally don't have a very fast attack, but they have a long release. And that's sort of the way the SSL bus compressor is. It's very gentle, and it just adds some glue that the Maxim doesn't do, for instance. So, and that's, I guess, the answer. The Maxim doesn't sound like the SSL. It's not necessarily made as a bus compressor. Try it. If it works for you, what can I say? It works, because sometimes you're surprised and something that doesn't necessarily work in one area works in another. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would just use it. But again, understand that on a bus, usually you're not using much. It's a dB or a couple dB. You're not hitting it hard because, generally you don't have to get that glue. Okay, let's go to the next one from Vince. Hi, Bobby. Do you recommend number 44 on acoustic bass or upright bass? Number 44 is the bass filter boost trick. And what that basically is you filter out the low end below 40, 50, 60 hertz. And then what you're going to do is right at the frequency, that the cutoff frequency, you boost. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes that works really well. It's kind of counterintuitive because you think that you're cutting off the low end, but you're actually emphasizing a certain frequency without it getting muddy and boomy. Does it work on acoustic bass or upright bass? Yes, but just like all of these tricks, it depends on the song, it depends on the arrangement, depends on the players, depends on the room, depends on, a lot of things. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. So again, it's one of those things where you won't pull it out every time, but there might be times where you go, wow, okay, it just works perfectly. But it's the same thing on an electric as well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Tiago asks, wondering when to choose a multiband instead of EQs and vice versa. You think a multiband sounds more natural? Yeah, it does. That being said, you're probably like me. I kind of forget to use it. Kind of forget it's in the arsenal a lot of times. And the first inclination is to go for an EQ. Sometimes you only need a little bit anyway. But what you'll find is a multiband compressor kind of works as a frequency dependent EQ, a dynamic EQ. It's only on sometimes when it's most needed. So it does sound really natural. And it's something that all of us, I think, should use more often. And I admit I'm like everybody else. I kind of forget about it. But it would be one of the first things that you should probably go for. And I wish I did it, but I don't. But now that you brought it up, I'm going to try it more. But yeah, it does sound more natural. It's a really good trick. Next one from Adrian. Is this similar to what a Pultec EQ does, a simultaneous cut and boost? Oh, okay. This is back to number 44, the bass filter boost trick. Yes, a Pultec can do the same thing. A Pultec is an interesting EQ because you can boost and cut the same frequency at the same time. And again, sounds funny, sounds weird, sounds counterintuitive, but it really works well. So it's one of those, and this is kind of where the idea came from. If you've ever used a Pultec and you've used that trick, you go, oh, that sounds pretty cool. So yes, Adrian, it's exactly like what a Pultec does. Oh, here's from Alwyn. Sometimes I don't know if there's too much room or overheads mixed into the closed mics. When do you know that there's too much of the distant mics mixed in? Well, there's no hard and fast rule, Alwyn. It depends on the mix, depends on the song, depends on the arrangement. Usually, if you find that the drums are becoming too distant sounding, then you've added too much in. And that's kind of the, and sometimes that's exactly what you want because you're trying to make the drum sound bigger and more affected and more ambient. So that'll work. And sometimes ambience is not what you're looking for. You're looking for something that feels closer to you, sounds closer to you. So then you'll use less. But it really does depend on the song. And the next question is, how can I keep this technique as phase coherent as possible? You can also increase. Okay. How can I keep this technique as, and I guess what you mean here is how can I keep my room mics as phase coherent as possible? Well, who says you want to? Sometimes it makes it sound too clean and it sounds artificial when you do that because phase is part of a natural sound. So I don't do it myself. You could if you like the sound, but again, it sounds very artificial when you begin to really line everything up. There was so many great songs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, all these great hits that were done without anyone ever lining up any phase because they couldn't, because they're working on tape. So just remember that we had great sounds without having to do that once upon a time, and it didn't matter. It sounds better when we do it on certain instruments, but like for instance on the bass, when you line up the direct with the mic'd bass amp, it usually sounds a lot better. Sounds fuller. Sometimes it works on the drum kit as well when you line everything up to the kick drum or the snare drum, and it sounds a lot bigger. But sometimes again, it sounds artificial, so it might not be something that you always want to do. The next part is you can also increase the room sound, delaying the room mics. Yeah, you can do that. And again, it's one of those things. If you want a bigger room sound, then go for it. Sometimes it's just better to add reverb. Sometimes, again, it sounds too washed out when you do it. So be careful. And then Elwin also goes on another tone on the 1176. Try shift, push in two of the ratio buttons. Yeah, what that is, and that's number 61, the insanely big room sound trick. That's basically what that all is. It's the nuke sound of 1176, where you use all four of the ratio buttons. Really, it works with two buttons in, but traditionally we always pushed all four in on the hardware. And now you can do it by just pushing a couple buttons and shifting. And that works really well. It's a different sound. It's used on room mics because, boy, it really provides some energy that you wouldn't get otherwise. So it adds more distortion. So understand that, and it's kind of a frequency dependent compression limiting that varies in ratio as well. So it doesn't work on everything, but it really works on room mics. So yeah, you're right, Alwyn. All right, let's go to live Q&A. And good, we got a couple of good questions here from David. 1984, referring to the kick used in this record called Let the Music Play. Oh, yeah, yeah. How do you get the kick sound huge like that? Okay, I think I answered that today on a forum or something. Really, all that is see, I don't think it's all that huge, but it's a different sound. And all it is either a gated sound, a gated reverb, or it's a nonlinear reverb, a nonlinear setting on the reverb on the kick. It's the same thing that's on the snare on that song. So that's really it. Other than that, it all comes down to if you had a great sound on the drum to begin with. Remember, there's only so much you can do to drums in terms of processing. It really has to sound good to begin with, and then you can make it better. But if something doesn't sound good to begin with, it's really difficult to get it that way and make it sound big. I think, as I recall in that particular song, it's also kind of floppy sounding, the uh, the kick drum. So in other words, it's not a tight sounding kick with in this case what it is, it has some ring to it, like it's a big double-headed kick. Is what it sounds to me. But really the sound on that song is all gated reverb or nonlinear reverb, one or the other. They're kind of the same thing. Okay, from Vince, do you use aux sends for every track that you want effects? Mostly, yes. You don't necessarily have to do it. If you're sure that you only want the effect on that one particular instrument or vocal, then just insert it on the track and just vary the amount. So that works too. One of the reasons why I rather use an aux send is if I want to automate things, I can do it. I mean, you can do it anyway if you use an insert. It's kind of easier, for instance, with the amount and everything. If you do it, maybe I'm being too old school here, but I feel like it's easier to automate things if you use an aux send. But the other thing is, there are times during a mix where you go, boy, I could use that sound on this instrument over here. So that's when it's nice to have it available on an aux send, so you can send that additional instrument or vocal to that effect. And that's why I'll usually go that way unless I absolutely know for sure this is the only thing I'm going to use it on. So I hope that helped here. Let's see David again. When you say time the reverb to the beat, do you mean from kick to kick? 2 beats for every kick. Well, it depends on the song. Again, I hate to use this, but the way it works, David, um, when you time it to the beat, generally speaking, you're doing it to the snare drum. Just about the time the snare drum hits, you listen to the reverb, just about the time the next one comes in, that first reverb decay has died out. And that's what you want. You don't want it, most of the time anyway, you don't want it so it's the tail is ringing over the next hit. And again, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you want it to sound really tight and together, that's kind of what you do. That's the way you time it. If you're going to put it on the kick, which doesn't happen that often, and you named a song before, "Let the Music Play." Um, you do the same thing on the kick, for instance. You might want to do it if you want it really tight. You do it from kick to snare. So kick hit to snare hit. If you want it really tight. If you don't want it as tight, you do it from kick to kick. But generally speaking, if you're going to use it on a kick and snare, and if it's the same effect, you'd probably do it from kick to snare. So I hope that clears that up. Again, it depends on the sound excuse me, it depends on the sound you're looking for. If you're looking for a sound that's really tight, then you want to time it. If you don't much care about that, and sometimes you don't need that, then don't worry about it. Let the decay ring over the next hit. And sometimes you'll want to go just the opposite. Sometimes you want to go every 2 hits. And this comes from things like ballads, for instance, where there's a lot of space in between, but sometimes there's a fill or something. So it really depends, on the song. Again, there's no hard and fast rules in any of this. Cool. I hope I answered your questions. Anybody else have anything? Now is the time. In the meantime, let me see what I have for you guys, if I have some other things. Oh, okay. Yeah, I have something here. Let me bring this up. So Here's something here. It's since you guys have been in my 101 Mix program, I'm going to give you a discount if you'd like to take your music career to the next level. In the Music Prosperity Breakthrough program that I have, there's a $50 coupon code for, and just put list sub in and go over and check that out, musicprosperitybreakthrough.com. And again, I think this lasts until the end of the day, but check it out. Okay, here's something else here. While I have you guys, let's see if I have a little poll. Yeah, okay. Here's a poll. And it's which module you found the most useful. So I'm always surprised when I ask this question because it varies all the time. So I'm curious which module you guys think is the most useful. In the meantime, Julio says, I have the Precision Maximizer plugin by Universal Audio. Yeah, I like that one too. Plan to buy the plug-in inflator by Sonox. Is there a substantial difference between them, and are they similar? No, they're not similar at all. They're somewhat different. It's apples and oranges. Precision Maximizer is kind of used in different places. And they have different sounds too. One of the things about Universal Audio plugins, which I love and I use all the time, there's a very organic sound to them. It's mostly because I think they're used to using hardware. They're used to their hardware company. They build hardware as well, so they know what it sounds like, and they just have a different approach. So I really like the sound of what they have. Sonex also has some great sounding stuff, but it's definitely different. It's sort of a cleaner sound, and many people like it better, or find it more useful. I don't use that as much. I have it. I don't use it all that much. Matter of fact, I can't remember the last time I used it, but the precision stuff I use all the time. Precision limiter I use in every mix, for instance. So yeah, try it before you buy it. Definitely try it on a couple different things. Make sure it's kind of what you're looking for. Okay, anybody else? Any other questions that we have? Please, now's the time. And okay, I'm looking at the poll here. It says, which is different than the last time, actually. For the most part, it's the effects everybody likes much more than, and techniques is second. So that's kind of interesting. Thanks for checking in on that. I appreciate it. And if there's no other questions here, then we're going to sign off for this one. Thank you for being here. Don't forget that you can review this because it'll be on the Q&A section of your dashboard pretty soon. This is the dashboard in 101 Mixing Tricks. Just go under the Q&A tab, and that's where you can play it back anytime, as well as all the other Q&As that we've had before. Okay, wait, David has one more question here. Okay. I add some delay to my lead vocals, still sounds a little plain. What else can you do to add excitement to the vocal? Well, that's easy. Just add some reverb to the delay. And you'd be surprised how good it will sound. So in other words, you have your delay, and probably you have a reverb as well up. You might have it on the drums, or just put a separate reverb up and add from a send on the delay, add some reverb. And you'll find that all of a sudden it won't be dull and boring anymore. It'll be really interesting. It'll be something that you'll use all the time. So thanks very much, everybody. And again, keep those questions coming. Ask anything you want in the forum. Ask it on, the comments of any of the tricks, or just send me something directly. I'm happy to help anytime. Thanks a lot.